Keep it pyro.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jordan. I'm going to be hosting this fantastic evening tonight. Welcome to Pyro Radio HQ. You all know why you're here tonight on this, bloody cold Friday evening. Renegade Hardware up in the house here. We're going to check out a bit later on some of the beats from the latest 20 years of Renegade. And I'm also here with, the two guys that are to my left and to my right. I'm joined to my right by Clayton, owner and founder of Renegade. Yep, woo, woo, woo. And Ink, one of the most iconic artists on the label and in the scene as well. Can we get a round of applause for him too? Okay, so I'm gonna kick off with some questions, guys, but while we're all kind of having a chat here, think of any questions that you guys might want to ask the guys, the gentlemen as well, and we'll kind of get those questions and intersperse those with the questions that I have here as well. All right, let's kick off. Let's start with yourself, Clayton. I want to ask a little bit about the label, and let's go right back to when it started. How did it start, and why did it start?
Okay, can everyone hear me, yeah? All right, cool. Hardware started in 1995. In 93, I set up a label called Trouble and Vinyl, which is the first label I set up, and that was more hip-hop orientated. And then in 94, we started Renegade Recordings, which was more a musical. It was like an outlet for the musical side. Back then they called it intelligent drum and bass. And then in 95, we decided that we wanted an imprint which was for the more techier, darker type of drum and bass. So hence we started Renegade Hardware.
Okay. And when did you come on board? What was your involvement from the get-go?
Well, my first sort of contact with Clayton himself was at a place called Music House, where it was pretty much the central hub for drum and bass in the early 90s and towards the end of the 90s, where we used to cut dub plates and, music that you would test and prototype on gig stuff. So that was my first meeting with Clayton, and at that time, none of the labels had really started. I think we were just getting into perhaps maybe launching Renegade Recordings. Through my affiliations with Metalheads, we were down at the Blue Note at the time. Some people still remember that.
You were there, yeah?
A couple of old heads. That's where the inspiration came for the spin-offs of Renegade Hardware and some of the other labels like Barcode later on and stuff like that. So my first sort of inception with the label was Clayton asking us to work on a piece of music at the time, because I was working with my other friends and we were known as the Architects. We were making music, more sort of melodic sounding stuff that you could get away with pretty much back in the day. And he asked us to do something for Renegade Recordings at the time, because he found one of our tracks, it was his favorite at the time. So that was pretty much our first meeting, and my introduction.
Okay, Clayton, tell me a little bit about the sound. What was Renegade supposed to be? What was the inspiration behind what sound you wanted to put out in drum and bass?
Hardware was, at the time, Tech Step was just starting. I don't know if you know Nico from No U-Turn, but he kind of pretty much championed that sound. So it was literally, it was an outlet to put out, like I said, the dark and futuristic drum and bass. We got the idea from going, obviously, to, back then we went to Speed and Blue Note and all that, and that kind of influenced the sound of the label as well. It was just drum and bass that was just, the best way to describe it was just dark and moody.
Is that a bit like you?
Yeah, I've been told that. Yeah.
So did the music and the inspiration behind the vibe and the sound of the label come from what you wasn't hearing or was hearing at the time? Or was it what was your musical kind of introduction into dance music? Did it have any relation to what Renegade kind of come with then?
My introduction to dance music was like 1985 was when I started clubbing. I'm 48, so I've kind of like saw it from the get-go. But so yeah, it was just, it was music that we knew was going to be popular, that a few producers were making. And I go back to No U-Turn, Nico, he was the pioneer of that sound. Before that, you had obviously acid house, then you had hardcore, then you had jungle, and then with the whole tech step, it was just like a breath of fresh air. No one was doing it.
And when you first released the first couple of releases on the label, what was the reaction? What was the response?
Thinking back now, I think our first release would, the enterprise that became sort of Renegade Hardware was with Loxy on, I think it was Airlock, a track called Airlock. So it was well received because we just did what we normally do, just, get some beats together and roll them out type thing. It would, no fuss really. Yeah. And that was our first sort of introduction. And then I think after that, because we were doing a lot of albums on Renegade Hardware and a lot of EPs at the time, Future Cut, Conflict, and Usual Suspects, and a few of you should know those EPs because they did landscape, our sound. So at that time, I think a lot of people were just kind of really, really battling to have their own EP. Within this special section, because Metalheads had that time as well, their first sort of 15 releases. If you look at those releases, they are the landscaping tunes that basically defined Metalheads as a sound. Same with Renegade Hardware. It did the same thing, but just slightly after, just slightly after. And at that time, it was all about getting the release out on that EP section.
Okay. How many people in the audience here ever went to a session at the end? I'm hoping a lot. Okay, a few of you here. I want to fast forward to that now, and just how did those end sessions come about? Because they were legendary. The End was kind of one of the most famous and most popular clubs in London at the time, and one of the most popular nights at the End was yours. How did that night come about?
There's a funny story to the whole End thing, because I used to go to the End. I used to sell drugs in there when it first opened.
Okay. Keep it real, yeah.
Keep it real. And so I went there when it first opened. I thought to myself, one day I'd love to do like a party in there and whatnot. So anyway,
why?
When I stopped, because the layout of the club and just the whole vibe. So anyway, when I turned legit and I started the music thing, we actually approached them and we thought they were going to say no, but they said yes under the pretense that we. Back then, they were bankrolling all the nights. But because they didn't know us and they didn't have any faith in us, they said, well, you can come in, but you've got to hire it. So I like to put my money where my mouth is, so I was like, fine, I'll hire it. And our first night was July 97. And it turned out we were the longest night in there. We had a residency there for 11 years. And I can't, I've been to a lot of clubs around the world and whatnot. And that one is my favourite one, just because the layout of it and the whole vibes. And if you didn't get to go, you probably think that we're kind of gassing, but it was a special place. And
no, it was a big night. It was a big night. Any questions at this point from anybody in the audience? Just want to disperse it. Yeah, go for it. I think we've got a mic. Have we got a microphone? Sorry, yeah. Just 1 second.
I was just curious what you mean by landscaping. You mean like creating a landscape over an EP?
Yeah, it's just me fluttering on. Basically, what I mean, just on ID, it was the identification. Blue Note, the club in Hoxton Square, was the club and basically the melting pot for all these producers to come and just basically experiment and be themselves. And they could literally do anything. That's what it felt like. And that's what the music sounded like as well, across the board. And it was very difficult to... You could basically play a track and identify it by the producer's style at the time, whereas... not so much now, where the lines are a bit blurred for who it is, because we're all trying to do the same thing, pretty much. For whatever that reason is, popularity, or maybe it just sounds good that way. But back in the day, as you know, it was so much more going on. So it was all about identification. So my point was, Renegade Hardware identified themselves around the period of about between 99 and 2004, I would say. The real identification came in around that period when we were doing the EPs.
Any more questions? This gentleman.
Do you find the fact that you were at the end helped shape the sound? Because you obviously had the Thunderwood sound system there and you could just hear what was going on. And if so, does that continue to the new venues that you play? Do you constantly update your sound to the sound, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Just to answer the first part of the question, that the end, most definitely. I don't know if you went yourself, but most definitely was another landscaping venue in terms of the gladiatorial feel you would have behind the decks, because the decks were plonked right in the center of the dance floor. You were surrounded by people, and they could literally come 1 meter, even closer sometimes, just to look over at your dub plates, and everything was real close and intense, but still an immense venue. And with the sound being, at the time, it was the best in Europe, I think it was held as, yeah? So it was definitely one for, you would have artists literally make tracks specifically for the different nights so they could shine or they could battle the next DJ who was coming on or the one before them. So yeah, definitely. Moving forward, not so much, simply because, I think, we lost a lot of that speed. I don't know if you know about that club, for the intelligent sound he mentioned earlier, that's whole Bookham-esque. We say Bookham because he kind of led the way with that sound back in the day. So that sound was through that club, and then Blue Note again, that sort of sound. After the end, I think it just became, we just needed a home for the sound because a lot of clubs were closing, and things were getting a lot more difficult with the smoking ban, and everything just becomes a lot more difficult with the IDing and stuff like that. So the focus kind of went away from, trying to make music for the club. We're just trying to get a club, so...
Clayton, what were the club nights that influenced the kind of night you wanted to put on? What were the nights that before you started putting on dances that you thought, yeah, this is a dance, or if I did a dance, I wanted it to be like this?
I'd have to say Blue Note. Goldie's night was... I went there religiously every Sunday, and I was the first one there and pretty much the last one to go. And you'd go down there, and it was the selection like Groove, Doc Scott, Goldie, Loxy and Ink. You just hear everything. And it, if your tune got played at Blue Note on the Sunday, Monday your phone's blowing up and every DJ wants to get a cut of it. And it was the place, and it was very small and intimate, and you'd open the doors and the heat would just hit you in your face, and it was, that had an influence, like a major influence on how Hardware was, because of Blue Note, basically, yeah. And I'd say, obviously, speed as well, that had an influence. And a lot of clubs, Thunder and Joy, Sunday Roast, AWOL at Paradise Club, all those clubs, I took bits and pieces of what they did and tried to make my own night.
I think it's kind of touched on it a little bit there, but what do you think has changed from 20 years ago, club-wise, to now? Because is it fair to say that you would say that clubbing now isn't as enjoyable, isn't as fun, it's not the same experience
it was?
It's a totally
different experience now,
if so,
man.
what's changed?
Where do I start? What's changed?
I would say for a start, the nature of our music, especially in initial stages, meant that you having some sort of smoking facility in the vicinity helped, So a lot of the bass lines were constructed on smoking weed, basically, So, so if you can't do that anymore while consuming it, it changes your perspective on what you're listening to. So yes, it has had an impact in terms of, removing it from the club, because, some people will argue, well, you can just go outside and come back. But that intensity is lost. Sometimes you need to hear the tune from the intro to the middle drop to the end to get that second drop the way it goes, without leaving the venue to smoke and then come back. So these are the sorts of things that have had a massive impact. Then obviously the culture of, and the nature of some of the stuff that people are taking into clubs, the toys that they're playing with now aren't like they were before. So there's people are in a lot of trouble, getting in a lot of medical trouble and stuff. So that's had a massive impact as well, as you may have heard with fabric closing and all of that behind that. So there wasn't so much of a focus on that because people were kind of getting to venues, having a good time and leaving a lot more than they are in more modern days because the rush for cash, so stuff is pretty much garbage. So that's had a massive impact on the nature of things. But
I also think that obviously the style of drum and bass has changed from what it was to now, where a lot of the stuff I listen to now I'm just not into. It's just because there's no soul and there's no melodies in it. It's just
say there's no soul would be...
I'm talking about the music now.
Yeah, it would be detrimental to some of the artists making it.
But that's
but
my
in
opinion,
terms
though.
of what I was saying earlier, I'm going to touch on what you were saying. That bass line factor has gone from a lot of this music, so it's more a sort of drum.
There's no subs in there.
Drum and
much,
mid bass. It's a drum and mid bass thing, and a lot of people, we came from the depths of that bass, smashing out your chest or rumbling your cheeks or whatever it is. So once that's been taken out, you've kind of got half of it, you know. And if you're not a breaks man, then you're listening to the other sound, which is a lot of the time just a kick drum. And if you start to take out the real essence of what the music's about, then it becomes something else, and that's what has happened, pretty much. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a gap there now, because you can hear with the other labels that did come through after Hardware, say, you know, your Criticals, your Samurais, even down to Shogun. Not what Friction's doing as such, but the other artists. You know, that sound, as you know, that sound. Only Hardware was doing it. It was Hardware and Metalheads, as you know, back in the day. That's it. Those are the labels that you would go to for that sound if you wanted it at its best. So, yeah, things have changed because of that.
Okay. Go on.
Touching on what I was saying earlier on about one of the reasons why I stopped the label was I just wasn't feeling the music no more. When I started it, it was a lot more energy in it and a lot more melody, and the neuro stuff now, I don't, you know, it's just noise. A lot of it's just noise, and you're like, I didn't sign up for that, man. You know what I mean? And they call it neuro funk, but there's no funk in it.
The label's not stopped. Your label hasn't stopped. It hasn't. Am I right?
Well, you're gonna hear it after this Q&A, our last album, and then it's literally gonna.
Yeah, the problem with stopping and having a final project is that you don't stop, do you? Especially when you're signing up new artists, which is what Hardware has built up their whole ethos on. That's what we've always done.
Well, I was going to actually ask, you say that the music isn't, you're not feeling it anymore. Is that generally, or the people that were making music for Hardware before have changed what they're doing now? So has the music completely changed, or just the people outside of your camp? Why have you stopped it, basically?
I'm just not feeling the drum and bass that's being made today. You got to remember, right? A lot of the producers who are making beats today, their influence would be someone like Noisia. Now, if you're just taking Noise's influence, what else is there? It's just gonna sound like Noisia. It's gonna, you know, it's. There's no easy way to say it, but I'm just not feeling it.
Yeah, but there is an easy way to say it. You came from a different era.
Yeah.
I spoke to one of the DJs from Texas, and she mentioned that a lot of these kids, their inspirations are Skrillex and Noisia. You know, they don't know the earlier sounds, and maybe some of the people in here, you know about disco music. If you talk to some of these kids about disco music, they won't have a clue. But these are the samples they're listening to within this music, and a lot of that changes things.
All they want to listen to now is what's out now. We was at Hospitality and we was listening to, who was he? Young guy played earlier on, and there's a guy next to me, young guy, maybe 21, and he was like, oh, you fucking smashed it. I said, yeah, he done really well. And I said to him, you looking forward to book him later? He's like, who's book him? I was like, hang on a minute. What do you mean, who's book him? He didn't have a clue.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem, and that's another huge problem with the way everything sounds and why everything's sounding very sort of samey, because artists aren't prepared to put in that work. Especially back in the day, if you wanted to make tracks, you had to go out and buy a desk. You had to have a patch bay. You had to have all the bits of equipment that people would just look at and be like, "What's that?" And like, I can't, you know. Yeah, we had Mackey's, Oberheim, off the top of my head, like literally JV 1080, Akai samplers. We had it all. So back in the day, if you invested in it, it was a real invest. It was your heart and soul. Everything
you had to have
go
about
into it.
$3,000 just to get started because it was all hardware.
So it was a serious
now
thing.
they can just download
Whereas
everything.
now you can walk into an Apple store, walk out, and pretty much have your little virtual studio on your back. Yeah, whereas before it was all wires and this, that, and the other. Not to say that it's not a great thing, because I've downsized my studio. But again, the sound is impacted, what you touched upon before.
I'm just jealous that they can start up for so easy. Now you have, now you have producers starting at 13,
Right,
14, like a lot of these kids out of Russia.
And he's clever with it, you know, and then here we go.
It costs no money to get started,
And that's where you lack, some of that richness in bass lines and depth, because they don't have the speakers and the subwoofers, because they can't be bothered to go and check a Dillinger tune from back in the day and say, how did he make that? And try and mimic it, or, it's just about the now. Can I get this out this week? Right, what's next week? And that culture there has helped to kind of water it down a bit.
Go on.
Source Direct making the crane in St Albans in their bedroom. Do you know what I mean? Source Direct making crane in their bedroom in St Albans.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Smashing it out.
Yeah.
The two of them on their headphones.
It's funny you said that, because they came to my mind the other day, because some producers were just talking about how quick they can do things. But I touched upon Source Direct, and I know Jim and Phil well. And one day in Speed, they explained how they make tunes, and they said they made friends with their machines. And literally, they would have an aim and break up for 2 days and just do different edits. And that's why their tunes sound the way they do, because they would literally make friends with their machines and just stay there and just master the craft. And that's why a lot of the tracks from back then you can still play today quite easily. Whereas there's some stuff made 2 years ago, you'd be like, what's that? You can't touch it, so...
Sorry, guys, if you do have questions, just put your hands up and we will come to you, because we need to get the mic so we can actually hear your questions. And that's okay, it's all right, it's all good. Go on.
One of the problems I think with the scene at the moment, and you touched on it earlier, when we were coming through, you had to put your money where your mouth is. You had to have a studio, you had to have faith in the record and take money and press it up. Nowadays, I know guys with 5 digital labels and they're putting up just a bag of nonsense every week because they can, because it's not costing them.
It's easy.
There's no... the quality control back then was you had to spend money. You knew if you put that record out and it didn't sell, you were pretty much fucked. Where now you can... And that's why there's so much crap out there. I don't mean to come across like I'm very anti-D&B, I'm not. But it is what it is. There is too much garbage out there.
Well, on that point, you mentioned a digital point there. Tell me a little bit about the differences that you've noticed as a label boss from the vinyl era to the digital era now. What are the pros and cons of then and the pros and cons of now?
More quality control back then. Like I said, you had to spend money for the TPs, for the mastering, for the artwork, and it's just like everyone thinks they're a record label now. Everyone thinks they're a producer because they've bought, like you said, some software, and all of a sudden they're a producer. Like making drum and bass is an art. There's an art form to it, and I think we're losing it bit by bit.
Yeah, just to touch upon that point, I think with drum and bass, more so than a lot of other genres, you have to wear a lot of caps. You have to be the composer, you have to be the producer, you have to be the engineer. Sometimes you have to be the DJ. Sometimes you have to be the distributor as well. So you got all those caps as an artist, especially if you're making this independent music. And with the fact that it's all so rushed now, there's not enough time taken on each of the parts. So the final product is just a lot less than what it used to be. Where, you know this is coming on vinyl, people would spend months on just the artwork alone because they got to get that visual image across to you about their music. Then obviously, like Clayton just touched upon, you got to spend money on these TPs and all this music. And before that stage, the dub plates, and you got to give DJs dub plates so they'll play them. So there was a lot to invest in a track, and with all that comes a bit more sort of exclusivity and quality. If you spend all that time on a package, then it you know, you can then charge.
When was the last anthem that you know? When was the last anthem that you know in drum and bass? Me personally, I think the last anthem was Marker.
Marker.
Yeah.
Does anyone know any other name of a tune that was big, like an anthem?
Was that? Yeah, but that was before Marker, wasn't it? So that was before Marker. So the point.
Anything after Marker. The point that Clayton's making is, back in the day, you had Atlantis. That's an anthem. Helicopter tune. That's an anthem.
Messiah.
We can keep going. Yeah,
The
you know what I
Nine.
mean?
The Nine.
Right.
You can-
We can pick tunes, but in this last 5 years, maybe even
10.
even
I would say
10.
I'll say
How many of those
8.
tunes can we actually pick in the same way?
But there's a reason why there's not a lot of anthems, because the drum and bass now is being produced on the mass and it's being flung out there, and the DJs ain't picking the tune and think, you know what, I like that and I'm going to rotate it. It's like, all right, I played that one, give me a next one. It's that type of vibe.
Sorry, can I just say, I think there might be a bit of an elephant in the room here, and that's jump up, right? To be honest with you. Now, like,
No, I want to hear what
you know,
say.
like, the jump up is great. It's got a place. It's got a place in the set if you want to have it, but it's got a place set. But it's not where it is. You know, like you said, like Roadblock. Do you remember Roadblock? That is, I'm calling that jump up from my era. That rolling bass
Okay,
line.
sing.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
That bass line. You know, Aphrodite. Yeah, you look at some Aphrodite and his old jump up stuff that we all love. Yeah, well, I think so.
No, Aphrodite does have some tunes out there. He does.
It's not like
He's
the
been doing
jump
it
up,
for
the
time.
wobble, the wop. That, as you said, there's no soul. It's easy. You just turn it over quickly.
It's throwaway music now. The music that's coming out is like McDonald's.
Exactly that.
You know what I
exactly
mean?
that.
Like you listen to it and the next day you be like.
But in saying that, because if there are people who've just come here and they want to know what drum and bass is and what's hardware, we're not saying that it's across the board like that. It's just the general consensus, because you can find quality still. If you look, there's loads of quality. There's bass lines out there still made yesterday.
Baseline that's what I see as jump up. Is the baseline that makes the jump up.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah,
But
fair
not
play.
the wobble.
Hang on. Let's get your hand up. Let's get some order going on, guys.
Listen, when you hear a tune, you can hear that the producer's thought about it and he's put his
Exactly.
heart in it, and he ain't smashed it out in 5 minutes and he's put it out there everywhere. Do you know what I mean? It don't matter. It don't have to be soulful. Do you know what I mean? We had a tune, Bumper Clock by Dead Code. Bailey played it at Soul in Motion on Sunday. Amazing tune, but it's got soul, but it's brand new.
Right. You see, that's what I'm saying. So it's pretty much up to how much the artist wants to put into it, how much your crew wants to put into it. You know, that's all it is.
Let me bring it back now to the label and come to you again, Clayton. What did you look for in an artist when you were signing artists and signing music? What were the, say, 3 key things that you looked for when you signed up an artist? I think he's done.
The first thing I saw and looked for was potential. Remember, no artist came to Hardware was the finished product, literally. And what helped us was the fact we had our own studio. And we knew from an early stage that having your own studio was key, because then you're not watching the clock. So once we had our own studio, we had all the artists in there. It was like a rota, like 2 shifts. You'd get someone there the first 12 hours, then they'd leave and someone else would come in for the rest. And it went like that until everyone perfected their craft. Back then, you didn't have flying faders and you couldn't save mixes. So literally, if you had a 12-hour session, you had to have the tune finished, or another producer coming in was going to take your mix down. So all that helped establish everyone. But getting back to your question, I looked at potential. You know, I'd get a demo and think, you know what, they're not quite finished, but with a bit of time, I'll take them out to a few clubs and whatnot, and they'd hone their craft, and that's what it was. Potential, I would say, and also the artists would have to be hungry. because it was literally a minefield out there, so to speak.
All right. And what is it that you love about the record label? What was it that was one thing that about this label that you loved?
I think the fact that it's just a freedom. We could just pretty much do what we wanted. And a lot of the artists that eventually became so-called legends on the label, we brought them into the fray, and they were getting their tunes returned to sender by other labels and stuff like that. You'd be surprised. Conflict themselves. Stuff sent back, returned to sender, and stuff like that.
I actually want to touch on, because that's a rumor which I want to dispel. This whole I stuck a gun up to Kamal and took his nut off him. And
yeah, it wasn't a gun. It was a bucky.
No.
It was a box. No, to touch upon that point, Conflict, Kamal and Rob Data at the time, they came through, the backs of Usual Suspects and all of that lot, and it was just like a big family. It was just a family. So people would have ideas and just shoot them round, and then someone would make a track and it would sound like this, and then obviously that would spark off inspiration in someone else. And then, like you were saying earlier, with the N Club coming up, if we had a date on the weekend, someone would do a special remix of a track, for instance, or someone would just do something fresh to try and, tear someone's head off. It
was a friendly rivalry.
Exactly. That's all.
It was a good rivalry. If someone came down to the studio and played a tune, other producers would be like, you know what, I'm going to do something better.
And it kept the buzz there. It kept the buzz going, and everyone was really. It was a fertile ground for tunes, and that's why you can hear it around that era. Everyone was really on that buzz thing. But with the Conflict thing, we had invested all that time with them, and then they had made Messiah, and then obviously. If you know drum and bass, you've heard Messiah.
Let's take it back a bit. Conflict, right? They sent demos out to everyone, and we mean everyone. Ed Rush, Groove Rider, you name it, they sent demos. Back then, you'd get like I still think you do it now, you get a letter for the letterbox saying you've got something to collect in the post office. No one bothered to collect any of their demos, yeah? So...
Yeah, so that was the introduction. Then obviously we caught wind of it, and you can hear that the boys are going to be big. Like, it wasn't rocket science. So we brought them in to the studio. They carried on making tracks, and then we built with them. Then they made Messiah. Then obviously at the time, Bad Company were big. And that the label...
Take the story back a bit. Bad Company left... Okay. So...
he wants to give you the gory details. So
no, that's okay. So, D-Bridge, Maldini and Fresh were on Hardware. We had a thing called Black Thursday, which was when all the artists left the label. And
they left because he wanted to sign them.
I said to them, look, we've got to the point where I want to sign you on a contract. They were like, no, we don't want to sign. So I was like, I gave them, mate, if you want to sign, then hit the door. So anyway, they left. And then, so there was animosity there already because they went on to make Bad Company. So obviously I was like, okay, we need to regroup. So then we found Conflict. So fast forward.
They made Messiah.
Yeah, they made Messiah. And then being Fresh, called up Kamal and was like, I want that tune and I'm only going to tell you once. I'm only going to ask you once or whatever. So obviously Kamal came to me being starstruck, was like, oh, we want to give the tune to BC. I'm like, no, you're not giving the tune to BC because we had a verbal agreement, a gentleman's agreement, and the tune's coming out. And then we spoke over 3 or 4 months. I was trying to be very tactful. And
as tactful as you can be.
Yeah,
but basically, the whole altercation happened outside a music house where there was one particular occasion. He had the DAT, Kamal had the DAT, and Fresh wanted it, and Bad Company were coming down to music house for the DAT, and then our Mark from Renegade Hardware was up there. He said, "You're not going nowhere with the DAT," and you know how that goes. So he took the DAT. Hardware eventually put the track out. Obviously, there was a big furore with the fact that Kamal, at the time, he was going through his own family stuff. It was nothing to do with the music as such, but that kerfuffle got mixed in with it, obviously. Then he had a family member pass away, and that's what made him just calm down with the production. It was nothing to do with, being stuck up with gats and this, that, and the third. That was all an internet furore. But that's basically the backstory. We invested time in an artist. They did their biggest tune, wanted to give it to someone else.
like fresh, yeah. Like you brought him up, you helped him out.
Very talented producer.
Yeah, of course he is. But he's massive, you know. He's what, number one? Did he get number one?
Yeah, he's had
like
two.
You know?
He's had a couple now.
Are you still close? Do you still?
Yeah,
chat?
we talk to Fresh. Yeah, listen, we can.
Right,
you know,
okay,
we've been making
okay.
tracks in the scene for ages.
Yeah,
We're not best of friends, but
Fresh is doing what Fresh is doing. If I see him, I say hello. We don't exchange
I
Christmas
hear that.
cards,
So
not
you know,
this.
like there must be some kind of animosity there that you've helped.
No, you know what? Look,
time's moved on now. There's been so much, so
many
many
people
other.
have passed through our doors. We put out Chasing Status. We put out the first drum and bass tune by Chasing Status. We put out the second drum and bass tune by Pendulum. We built Spore. It's, you know.
There comes a time in the scene, like what we're doing here is we're trying to unfold some of the understory, but what you see is the surface of things, the finished product. Every single time, that's all you see. The work that goes into actually getting to these finish lines on all of these projects that you've seen has, you know, been blood, sweat and tears.
Would you want to do the same job for 25 years?
If it's a good one, yeah, why not? You know,
After a while, you get to... Me personally, I don't want my life to be defined by drum and bass and 170 BPM.
I think the fact is, when something goes in a direction that you don't want to go in, then your time is over.
By the way, have you come here from Texas for this?
I came here on holiday, but
Okay,
yes, yes, I did. I came here just for this. No, I'm here on holiday, but seeing this was really exciting, and I've spent a lot of money on your label and
Thank you very
on
much.
your tunes.
Thank you.
I just wanted to get clarification on something that you said about when you say they left the label. Are you talking about Fresh? I mean, are you talking about the Three of the Bad Company guys that left? And when you
and
say
the
the
rest.
label, you mean yours?
Yeah, basically, as he mentioned earlier, TLV had a studio and was the HQ and the hub for our artists on Renegade Recordings, Renegade Hardware, Barcode, and all the other labels that came out from that. When they left, they basically left that fray because we didn't sign anyone. It was just a family. It's like a street family. Yeah, you must know. Like, that's it. It's a handshake. That's my family. Let's get on. We should try to move forward. As soon as the paperwork started getting mentioned, that's where problems come in because people get worried that they need to make this money and they're not going to make it or whatever for whatever reason. So on that day that's when the so-called
Black Thursday.
Yeah, that's what we call Black Thursday. That's when the family, the music family as such.
Like everyone left. We had 7 artists and they all walked out the door.
What year was that?
Left.
98, I think. 98.
98.
That was still during Trouble on Vinyl days or
Yes,
during Renegade
yes,
Hardware?
yes,
Okay.
Yeah, literally no artist
yeah.
left. Gone. Everyone gone.
Yeah.
So basically, starting from scratch. And at this time, I hadn't walked into the studios yet. But myself and Loxy then, with Clayton and
Got Usual Suspects,
a couple of the other artists, we
Future
then
Cut.
built it up again
Conflicts.
by getting these other artists.
Did you have to go back with the releases that you had already put out and start doing contracts for licensing and things like that? Or have you had to do that since now in the digital age? Have you had to backtrack and deal with all of that?
There was a huge mess and it was too, basically at that time it was too large to go through. It was underground music. So again, our figures, if we were talking about, you know, Sony figures or something like that, then maybe it would have been important to do that, but we're just a couple of guys from road trying to sell a bit of music, so it was never really any of that issue. But after that time, that's when we said, right, we need to get some things in place. And
that's what I'm asking is, like, let's say, you know, 5 years after that,
Yes.
did you find that you had to go back and negotiate contracts
no
when it was
just moving forward?
Oh,
We would
okay.
deal with the artists different, but there was no backtracking because those tracks were done, they were out, and that was that.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with 360 deals, which are commonplace now, but we were trying to implement that in 1998. So we were kind of ahead of ourselves as far as how we thought of the future. Like, our ethos was, if we're going to sign you, we want to sign you for a long period so we can both grow together as an artist and a label. You know, and I think we were too in that way of thinking, we were pretty much ahead of our time because people thought we were crazy. And now a 360 is common knowledge in music.
We're going to come to the actual album in a minute, but I want to ask a question that I'm hoping many of you guys want answered as well. I'll ask both of you, what was your favourite track on the album, on the label, sorry. One track, what was the best track for you?
That's hard, right? Yeah, like
Just
you
one.
you must know that's hard. Oh man, my favourite track on Renegade Hardware.
Yeah. Clayton's going to jump in, because Clayton knows.
Go.
He knows.
No. My favourite track was Roadblock. And for the simple reason, it was the start of a new era. And, because, like I said, all our artists left and we were literally starting from scratch. And that tune was like a breath of fresh air. There's like a hierarchy as far as producers go with that sound. So you got Nico that started it. Then there was Optical. Then Optical passed the baton to pretty much Conflict. And then Conflict passed the baton to Noisia. So for me, it was good to have an artist that helped shape the scene. So that's why that tune's kind of personal for me.
Got one?
I'll probably just go with Airlock, just say my first release, because obviously he never got round to producing on Renegade Hardware. He's done some earlier stuff. But for Hardware itself, definitely that. Or perhaps I would even say Need You, for the simple fact that it was the first melodic tune with vocals that had ever been on such a dark, crazy label, you know? So... yeah, I'll just go with my tune. And then obviously Messiah after that. So.
Okay.
Just have a quick shout out to everyone in the audience what their favourite.
What's? Raise your hands and we'll come to you. Who's got a favourite Renegade track?
Probably Unreal by Concord Dawn and Ill Skills.
Yeah, Unreal. That's
Man.
a
Why?
It's called
tough
The
tune.
Hard Knocks.
Tough tune.
Bro, when I heard it, it just blew me away. Like, I still remember it. The experience right now, it just blew me to pieces, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's
Nice.
a crazy one. That was in my box for ages. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I still draw that.
Come on, you must have a favourite track.
For me, it's Relock.
Relock. Oh, cool. Yeah. Airlock remix.
Just the play with the bass. I was
Yeah, the bass line. Yeah. Cool. Where you from?
Poland.
Poland, yeah? Tuck.
Anybody else?
For me, was Killer Bees.
Killer Bees, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah,
Suspects.
Why?
One of the reasons why is the way that the tune was structured is one of the first ones I remember that a lot of producers do it now, or it's a technique that's used where it gets to the end of a break after the tune's dropped and they cut out the break, put a sound in, then the break comes back in. And that was the first one for me with Killer
Right.
Bees. That
The
it had
black
that-
edit, which we call it, yeah.
Exactly, that's
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
for me really stood out, yeah.
So let's talk about the album now. What was your thinking behind the album? What did you want to achieve with this album?
To be honest, we basically come to the finish line, and we just wanted an album that would represent the label over its complete span, rather than releasing an album of the now. So, if you did pick up the album for the first time and you'd never heard drum and bass, you were able to
Full
experience what Renegade Hardware as a concept, not just as a label, was about. So it was important to convey our history, and also the fact that we bring on a lot of artists, new artists. So you'll see a lot of new artists on there. And it was also important to touch on what we were talking about earlier, the essence of the sound as well. So we made sure that was a factor.
My ethos was just to make it the best project around, and in my opinion, it is. It was supposed to come out this year, but due to what's the word? We just got more tracks. We just kept getting more and more tracks in it, and we were like, you know what? We want to make this a kind of epic project. So the way, do you want to explain how it's coming out as far as?
Yeah, so basically we had to format it. So we've got a CD, which is the classics that you'll hear on Renegade Hardware from its introduction. Then we've got an exclusive remix package, which you'll get if you get the album in its entirety. So you've got special remixes from various artists. Then we got the Neuro Sound CD, obviously, as we've touched upon, the mid-rangey sort of drum and bass that's been floating around, which I aptly named Shroud Shroud. I've been calling it Shroud Shroud for years. But yeah, that sort of sound. And then obviously the Horseman sound, which myself and Loxy have been pushing on the label for a good amount of years now, which is basically where we came from, the bass lines and stuff like that. We gave it a label simply because we had to ID the difference between what the kids thought was popular now and what we grew up with, because we still exist. So we had to cater for our sound. So, you know, we just gave it that name. So across the CDs, you're going to have up to, I think, 6 CDs, because you're going to get special mixes from Loxy and a couple of the other boys. So you'll have the album mixed, and then you have the classics, then you have the up-to-date Neuro CD, and then you'll also have the Horseman Sound CD. And across that, I think we're looking at like 100 tracks. So, you know, no one's going to be hungry for anything. You'd be good.
Yeah, but hold on. Out of the 100 tracks, 30 classics. So there's 70, is that correct? 70 new tracks?
Yeah, 70 brand new tracks. It's 30 classics. But obviously, not every, even if you are a Hardware fan, some of those tracks you won't have on there just from not having them. You know?
Sorry to touch on what you're saying. I don't know how many of you went to our last event, but I had the same kind of thought process. I wanted this album to be epic, and I think we've done it.
When and where can we get it?
It's gonna be, well, if we pull our finger out, it's gonna be out realistically end of February, beginning of March. Yeah. It was supposed to come out this year, but because we got so much tracks, we just...
Yeah, we've had to revise it and just pull some things off and change a couple of things here and there.
We were gonna put it out, and then we're gonna get press on it and do some little special projects for it. So it will be out end of February, beginning of March, 100%.
The thing that pushed it and extended it maybe a bit is we always had the thought of doing a final album, but you know, once it starts coming together, then you start realizing how big the project is, and then you start caring a bit more about how you want it. So that's why it's just kind of been extended. But you'll be happy with the final project, definitely.
Any final questions from the audience? We've got one from the gentleman at the front here. Can we get a microphone to our friend?
I really hope it's not the final project. Is it really? Is it really? Is that it?
You know what?
He looks gutted. He's well done. He's really upset.
My thought process on the whole closing the label and the events thing, 20 years is a good number. It's a round number, and we didn't want to be one of them labels that have got to be dragged out the scene and leaving a bad smell. We've had 20 good years. The last party was successful. The last album will be that, and we'll just leave it at that. It's best to be known for ending on a high, and that's what we want to do.
I had asked Crust this back in the day, and he had given me a number, and I was curious if this is correct. What would you say would be a good release number in terms of vinyl, like a bestseller? Is that 8,000, 4,000?
That's like saying handles a piece of string. I can tell you that we've had releases that's done 30,000 upwards.
Okay.
For independent, you know, if you talking about figures for today?
No.
Oh, back in the day. Oh, right, yeah.
Our most ever, I'm not going to tell you the name of the tune, but it was 45,000. But that was across vinyl and CD. Vinyl, a good vinyl, was about 20,000. Yeah, anything over 20, you did
20 to 30,000, you got an anthem on your hands, and you know, and an artist with an ego.
Yeah. All right, guys. So next February is going to be out. This February, February coming, it's going to be out. So
yeah,
guys,
February 2017.
17.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much. You better be out in February. Guys, thank you for your time. We've got one question. Sorry.
I've got a question for both of the guys, actually. I'm wondering what your biggest accomplishment is and your biggest regret, if any.
Biggest well, I say it's big, but I think it was the year that we won the Knowledge Award for Best Label and Best Event. Because the year before we got knocked, we got skanked. We should have won it the year before. We didn't win it, and my attitude was like, right, we're gonna go full pelt this next 12 months, and we won that, and it was good. It was a good to be, what's the word? Recognised by your peers and by the industry. You know, so that was one of our like best accomplishments. As far as worst, I don't really have any regrets really. So, well, I wish I would have signed Chasing Status back then. I'd be rich.
Yeah. In terms of the regret, would definitely be just as we are, and the whole role thing, just having someone who could do the admin a bit better.
Because you got to remember,
you know, someone who could type and do all the faxes and all of that sort of stuff. So we would have been a bit more organised in that sense, because no one could be bothered with any of that. And you have to be if you're going to do it properly. And that's probably our biggest regret. However, we did have Mark in the offices who did that, but then he left, and you know it left a big gaping hole there.
You got to remember as well, I came literally from the streets into running a record label. I didn't have any experience. It was like the blind leading the blind. So, you know, I think we did all right, you know what I mean, compared to like a lot of other labels out there.
Yeah, we're pretty much the hands-on type of guys. Like if we needed it, we just go out, get it type thing. Didn't have all the flowery, you know, language that goes with it. So it's, in that sense, to achieve 20 years is our biggest achievement. You know, the fact that we're still here and we've got this legacy of all these artists that have passed through. Because pretty much, if you look at the scene now, or even back then, 90% have gone through Renegade Hardware doors, and sometimes first. You know, their first sort of introduction to drum and bass was via the hardware door. So that, in its sense, is probably the biggest achievement.
Indeed. Any more questions, guys, before we hear some music? Hang on.
I remember it must be 98, 99 that I had a broken cassette with you on the hype shows. It's around the Killer Bees era, you know, and that is really what got me bang on into my drum and bass. Yeah, that bang on in.
It's still strange to get people coming up to me saying how much of our label had an influence on their life and what, and it's good. It makes the hard work. It makes it, when people tell you that they like your music and you were inspiration to them, it makes you think, all right, all that hard work was worth it, because that's what music's supposed to do. It's supposed to evoke emotion.
There was never any real money in it, and that was the problem with the artists that you see come and go. They were waiting for something that wasn't really there. And if you're going to do this, especially back in the day, you had to do it just because you loved it. You just liked the actual sound that was going in the ear. If you were looking to line your pockets, there wasn't a place to be. Obviously, as time has gone by, people have built up business enterprises and made it a bit more special in that sense. But in its, you know, in the beginnings, it was all about the love for the music. So.
All right, guys, I'm sure you lot. Go on.
I just want to say one thing, touching on what you said. And I think that's where the music's kind of gone wrong now, because people are not doing it for the love. They're doing it because they think there's a big paycheck out there and they can swan around and give it to Charlie Big Bollocks. And it's, you know, for every Chasing Status, that there's 1,000 failed musicians, producers, DJs kind of thing. It's not all what it's cracked up to be. And this is someone who's been in it for 25 years. The music, like, if you're not careful, it can eat you, like, mentally and physically.
I agree with you, but you know, you're a stalwart for that. Exactly, the fact that you've done it and pushed on through it. You know, you're a figurehead, not. You know, like...
Yeah, that's what I was actually trying to tell him the other day.
Yeah, we were having this conversation yesterday, and he was telling me that I'm an ambassador for... I don't look at myself at that. I'm just Clayton, and obviously a lot of you know I talk shit on Facebook and whatnot. But that's just me being me. It's not an act. I'm like that because that's my gym. When I want to let off steam, some people go to the gym and run on the treadmill. I go on Facebook and say what's on my mind. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Right, here's some music now. But before we do that, can we get a round of applause, please, for Clayton and Ink, please?
Keep it pyro.